Welcome to Unscripted, a podcast with no script by design. We're not following a plan, and that's exactly the point. This show is about whatever's on the minds of your hosts, Larry Lannan and Duncan Giles. We'll dig into what's happening in the world, and just as importantly, what isn't making headlines this week. So, with that, let's get started. The conversation could go anywhere because we go wherever the microphones take us. Here's Larry Lannan and Duncan Giles. I'm Lannan, he's Giles, and this is Lannan and Giles Unscripted for September 19th, 2025. Duncan Giles, welcome back again.
Thanks, Larry. It's always good to be here.
Well, I noticed as we begin this podcast, for those who are listening and not watching on YouTube, you have exactly the same background you had last week with the lake. So I'm curious why you have decided to stay with that background.
Yeah, funny story. Well, maybe not so funny. As the people who listened last week, and as you know, Kim and I traveled up to Michigan. And one of Kim's favorite things to do is to go rock hunting. And basically, for those of you who don't know, especially in the Great Lakes area, there are things called Charlevoix stones and Petoskey stones that go up on the beach. So you go down on the beach and you look for these stones, and according to Michigan state law, you can only get 20 pounds per year, that sort of thing. Well, Kim and I, she goes in, I sit in a chair on the beach and watch her. You some sandy areas and it's pretty rocky, but we didn't want to wear our regular shoes because, you don't want to get them sandy and dirty and all that stuff. So we had some water shoes, pretty decent soles. Apparently not good enough. Kim was experiencing some foot soreness, and it got progressively worse. So earlier this week, my beautiful wife, Kim, she went to an urgent care, which is something on a Sunday that she would never do, or Monday night, she would never, ever do. And they basically said, yeah, we're not quite sure. They took x-rays, didn't see anything, da-da-da. So we both made the decision, hey, let's go to a specialist. So she went to an urgent care ortho group, very well-known here in the Indianapolis area, great folks. And it turns out she's got a hairline fracture on her foot. And, trying to figure out what caused that. And, the doctor had asked her what she was doing. And she said, yeah, we went up to Michigan and all that. And he goes, oh yeah, if you're hunting on those rocks, if you're standing on those rocks, because it is very rocky versus sandy, if you're standing on those rocks and you're not used to it, you don't have sturdy shoes, then, oh yeah, that could cause it. So my beautiful wife, Kim, now has a hairline fracture of her foot.
Oh my gosh, Duncan, that's unbelievable.
But that's not, and that's not even, I started having pain in my right foot. And I'm like, what am I doing? Getting sympathy pains? So I proceed to go to the same clinic a couple of days ago. And I do not have a fractured foot, but apparently I sprained my ankle pretty badly in the sand. And the physician's assistant who saw me said I must have rolled it pretty good. And she goes, wearing those water shoes, yeah, you don't get the protection. And I loved her quote. She said, you must have pissed off your foot a great deal for you to have this much damage. Okay. So Kim's in basically for lack of a better term, a removable walking cast for a couple of weeks while she tries to heal up her fracture. I'm sitting in an ankle brace here at home that continues to flare up. So it's been a lot of fun.
Well, now, Duncan, the one thing I know, just knowing you as I do, that this will put a serious crimp on that very, very serious how should I put it, exercise program you have on a regular basis.
Absolutely, it does. I've had to go from zero down to zero. It's awful. No, it was funny. Yesterday, I felt good enough to do some laundry. Hobble around, being able to do that, which ticked off not only my foot but also Kim, because the way that my ankle's going, it's been tough for me to sleep at night. Hitting positions. So she's like, "Today you're doing nothing." Okay, I'll try and uphold that if you need me to. Try and do nothing.
And it's worked, I assume.
So far, yeah, it's still early, but yeah, so far it has worked, and I do plan it. But it's just the darndest thing that she ends up with a fractured, hairline fracture, and I end up with a severely sprained ankle just for that type of activity.
They're going to have to put a warning sign up on these rocks. Do so at your own risk.
Yeah, you needs to do something. And my other favorite quote from this has been, we were in bed a couple of nights ago, and I said, well, and I started this is how I started, Kim, at least the two of us have. And she just popped in before I could say something really nice, like, we have each other, we'll get through this. She pops in with a very apt and apropos statement: one good leg between us. Okay, if that's how you want to look at it, yes, that is accurate. That wasn't where I was going, but that was so apropos.
In that sense, our wives are a lot alike. So, yeah, I think that's not something Jane would say to me in a situation like that. I'm really sorry, but I know that it's taken quite a bit here because you're trying to rest your body, and yet you are still willing to do the podcast.
Yeah, thankfully that does only exercises my brain and not much else. So that's always a good thing. But yeah, I just wanted to share that with you and listeners and viewers on that it was just like wonderful vacation, had a great time, but apparently looking for rocks is damaging to an old person such as myself and even a young person such as my wife.
Well, you're on the way to recovery. It sounds like Kim has given you the right advice. Stay off the darn thing. And she's got her cast. So you are on the road to recover. And probably in 2 or 3 weeks, it'll all be behind you. That's the only good news there is. But Duncan, I like to pick out news stories that don't make the mainstream media very often. And it just so happens that my first story has at its center rocks. And
Okay, can't get away from them. Okay.
do you know what stone skimming is?
Yes, you basically take a stone, skip it across a lake, that type of thing, or
You-
pond.
You're trying to skip it across a lake. It's a certain kind of talent. I'm not sure I could do that. Did you? I'm sure this will not surprise you. There is, in fact, a World Stone Skimming Championship. They have this in Scotland, and they just recently had these championships. But Duncan, the Stone Skimming Championship world was rocked by a cheating scandal. That's right. Several competitors in this world championship for stone skimming were disqualified. Now, this there are 2,200 people from 27 countries. This is a big deal. This is a very big.
Apparently.
It's like the Olympics of stone skimming, I guess. So they all attended this. It's on the Isle of Easdale, right off the Scotland coast. Now, the rules in stone skimming say that you have to use stones that come from naturally occurring island slate. Well, some of the people there found it was found that some of these competitors had their stones ground into a suspiciously circular shape to help them bounce it off the water better than these stones they were supposed to be using. But I guess it must be one of those gentlemanly and ladylike sports because the organizer's name was Dr. Kyle Matthews, and he told the BBC that the offenders had held their hands up and apologized. They owned up to it, Duncan.
Well, first off, yes, if you've never done stone skimming or stone skipping, as it's sometimes called, you do want a particular type of stone. The best types are round and flat bottomed, and you throw them a certain way to try and get them to move. I'm glad to see that they owned up to it, unlike like the steroid scandal in baseball. where they still, some of them say, no, I never juiced, even though your head grew 3 sizes.
Well,
But
I got to tell you a funny story because my late friend Jack Mitchell and I somehow were able to get tickets to the All-Star baseball game in Cincinnati many years ago. And we didn't get seats very close to this, but we were there. We were up in center field watching the players as they were warming up. This was before the scandal broke. And I was just looking at him and said, take a look at Jose Canseco. Just to look at the size of that man. And he was like a man among boys in terms of just his size. And said, do you really think that exercise and diet did that for him?
it's the same thing. At least in stone skimming, apparently, that they I'm guessing the prize money was not as big as something like Major League Baseball. I'm amazed that there was nobody from the Guinness Book of World Records there to see if they could beat whatever the record is. But I'm glad that they owned up to it, and whoever won that, I hope they did it fair and square, or at least didn't cheat and forgot to raise their hand.
Well, I hate to disappoint you, Duncan, but I do not have a Guinness World Book of Records story today, but I do have another one. Are you old enough to remember Indiana's blue laws?
In what way? Blue laws in
Okay,
what
let me
way?
tell you okay, then you didn't. Let me tell you what the blue law, I'm old enough to remember what they were. Blue laws were laws that said you couldn't open certain kind of stores on Sunday
Yeah.
for
Yep.
religious reasons. Those were called the blue laws. I never forget a friend of my dad's walking into the house. He goes, "These blue laws are making me blue." So he just did not like the idea there. And it was funny, the people who really kept it going was not for religious reasons. In the old days, Indianapolis had two or three major local department stores. One was L.S. Ayres. It was one of the big high class stores in downtown Indianapolis. And for years, that was their only store in downtown Indianapolis. Well, downtown is where the blue laws were pretty well, accepted and observed in the downtown area for retail. But the funny thing was, LS Airs decided to start building stores in the suburbs. They called them airway stores. They're kind of like what Target would be today. And after that happened, they just kind of said the blue laws were no longer, they started opening their store downtown as well as the suburban stores, which they had to keep open on Sunday just for business reasons. So it's funny how it started out as some kind of religious observance and went away, not for religious, but for, big surprise, commercial reasons.
Yeah, and some of the blue laws included alcohol, where on election day you couldn't drink until after 6 p.m. Couldn't sell liquor on Sundays. Those types of things. Those I remember. And I do have a couple of quick related stories to LS Airs. If we're talking about that ancient thing, my late mom was a runway model for LS Air. She was the one that they do local things. She did this before, apparently, she and my dad were married, where, she would model dresses and things of that nature to, they would have shows, I would guess. Nothing like Paris or New York, but here in Indianapolis, when they do LS Air shows in the mid 50s, she would do that. The second one related to Airs is Airs was started by Lyman Airs. That's the L for the LS Airs. And Lyman Airs used to like to trade in his Cadillacs about every 2 years. He'd get these big Cadillacs and trade them in every 2 years. Well, my late father, had an in with the dealership and the salesperson that he dealt with because, Mr. Ayers didn't drive him that much. So my dad was getting used Cadillacs every 2 years at a great price at a very low mileage because of LS Air. So there's my related to LS Air stories for you.
Well, and there are a lot of stories about Lyman Ayres, if you're an Indianapolis history buff, but we won't get too much into that. One reason I mentioned the blue laws, Duncan, is that it's hard to believe, but in Germany, they have something like that. I can't even pronounce it, but there's a name for it. They call it a Christian-based mandate, and it's only in certain parts of Germany where basically, excuse me, you shut down a lot of, not every business, but a lot of businesses. It doesn't apply like to restaurants and gas stations, pharmacies, but it does. There are certain other businesses in Germany that are supposed to close, particularly like manufacturing operations and just, where people tend to work. It's interesting that it went before a judge. Somebody filed a lawsuit or that's equivalent in German law and said that if you have to close certain businesses, like let's say manufacturing outfits or other types of businesses, what if they're run by robotics? What if it's robots? Well, the judge said the way that law was written, you were required to give robots Sunday off.
So they didn't in the laws, because I would bet that those laws that they have didn't really differentiate. They basically said you must be closed Sunday for religious purposes or something along those lines. Um, that they didn't differentiate back then because they probably had no idea that robotics would advance when these laws were first proposed.
Well, this was passed in 1919, so you're spot on there.
Yeah,
But
yeah, there weren't many of those. Steampunk maybe, but aside from that, there shouldn't have been many.
so do we know exactly which type of religion these robots are practicing?
Yeah, that there's a whole can of worms right there. You just never know. But yeah, I find it interesting, and yeah, I think that it's one of those things where it used to be, if you stole a pig and you'd be put in the the braces in the town square type thing. It's those some of those laws in certain places are still on the books because they never updated them. And I think as we go with technology, robotics, things of that nature, I think there's going to have to be a lot of things that are going to have to be updated for situations not exactly like that, but very similar that nobody had any idea about.
Now, Duncan, there's one thing about me that's been around for, well, since the early 1980s. I have had a beard since the early 1980s. I actually had a beard for a period of time in the 70s and shaved it off, and I brought it back in the early 70s. I was a single guy at the time, and a couple of ladies I worked with thought I should grow a beard. So I always took their advice, and I've had it ever since. But the question that always comes up, if you've ever been online to see some of these stories that pop up, on whatever website you're on, you'll see headlines often about beards. How dirty are beards? I have seen stories online that allege that beards are germier than toilet seats. So I thought, is that true? Okay, I've looked at the science. No, that is
Yeah,
not,
I would hope not.
not the case. Overall, beards, they say, the scientific community, they say that it's no more infection risk than any other part of your body. There's going to be germs that come with any living organism. But guess what the solution is? Wash your beard.
I,
So
I was going to say, yeah, yeah, just like any other body part, you want to wash it. I think that would probably help keep the majority of the germs away. Now, I'm very happy that your beard is cleaner than a toilet. I am very happy to hear that, but that still doesn't mean I'm going to kiss you. So
no,
I just want
Duncan,
to put that out there.
I'm really disappointed there.
I know you are.
Yeah. Well, Duncan, one thing we've talked about on this podcast in the past, and it's still a center of talk everywhere, artificial intelligence. So I thought, let's look at this from a different angle. What about rank and file people, regular folks who are not geeks about technology or AI? How do people use AI if they're using it at all? So I looked this up. What's the number one use that people, just regular people, get if they get on an artificial intelligence program?
I would think something like Google, where they're being suggested to or directed to a certain product. I would think.
Talking to the chatbot. Talking to the chatbot. I have seen stories where there are people who like kind of live alone. Maybe they even work
Yep.
from their home. They never leave their home for much of any reason. The only friend they have is the artificial intelligence technology. Now, Duncan, I don't know about you, but that's a little bit scary for me.
It is, and like you said, these are people who are alone. I can see a benefit for people who are maybe shut-ins, things of that nature. Um, to use it as part of their social interaction, but shouldn't by no means be all of it. But yeah, if you've never had a conversation with AI, I have. I've tried it. It's interesting. It's not very fulfilling, but it can be interesting.
It's funny because they're supposed to have certain standards about certain things they're not supposed to talk about, but yet there are ways around it. And I always thought that was hilarious. But the second leading thing that people do with their AI technology is create virtual characters. So all you have to do is say, I would like for you to create a monster with large teeth, and they'll do it. Create a
Well, sort of
picture.
like the avatar that we have for our podcast that you
Well,
created.
yeah, and for full disclosure, the picture that we use for our beginning and end of our podcast on video, and we also have it as an avatar on the audio version. That was artificial intelligence because I don't look that good. I can sure I don't have nearly that much hair. I know that, but they were very kind to me in the artificial intelligence world. But the third one is kind of dovetails into that. People use it to spruce up your photos. I don't know about you,
Oh
but
yeah.
any photo of me can use a lot of sprucing up.
I'm with you right there. There's not enough Photoshop in the world to make me look good. But yeah, I mean, and it's funny because in the dating world now, that's what happens a lot of times because people use Photoshop or AI, other versions of AI, to improve their looks. And when people meet in person, it's like you don't look anything like your picture.
But as a side note, this is done on video, and it's kind of scary what could be done there. I saw a demonstration online of a man who the video was there, and it says, "Hello, I'm Morgan Freeman." It looked exactly like Morgan Freeman, sounded exactly like Morgan Freeman, but the man creating that was a white, bald-headed guy who didn't sound anything like Morgan Freeman. They just took his voice, his image, his video image, and created a video that looked and sounded just like him. So the implications of being able to do that, Duncan, I mean, just in the political world and other
Yep.
places, that's a pretty scary development, don't you think?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It is the deep fake type thing where you're creating these versions. Well, I never said that. Well, here's a recording of you, a video recording of you saying exactly that. Well, that's not me. Yeah, and it's gotten to the point now where they can edit it so well that it is very, very scary with stuff like that can happen.
I do a series of podcasts in my local area. I do a podcast that's related to my local news blog, and I interviewed the president of the local teachers union, who's also an English teacher. And he was talking about how AI is being used in the classroom, particularly in something like an English class. I mean, they have to go with a fine line, and here's why. You don't want the artificial intelligence program to write their papers for them, except for as an example. But on the other hand, if you never use artificial intelligence, you're not going to be ready for the world that is coming. You have to figure out how to use it at the same time. So what they do, as I understand, our local school system, they'll say, okay, and they have like they use colors, red, blue, gray. Okay, this is a blue assignment. That means you cannot use any artificial intelligence. You have to write it yourself. Here's a middle one. You can write it and you can ask AI to help you with it or to give you suggestions or polish it.
Okay.
And then there's others where you can just suggest to AI what you want done. So what they're trying to do is hit that happy medium. But I think this whole idea of students writing papers that they turn in that they've written at home. I mean, they used to worry about their parents writing it for them or friends writing
Right.
it. Now they're worried about a computer writing it for them.
And I think it's very tough to tell. I mean, originally when this first was coming out, they were almost too perfect. And so a teacher or professor could sit there and say, okay, look, I know this was not written by you because it was done in this way. But now it's gotten to the point where it can be extremely tough, I would think, for a for someone to be able to tell if it's the actual person or AI. And you have to go back to your first story about the stone skimming, where you've got to have the honor system for, have the students do that, but then there's so much pressure to get good grades so you can get to the right college and things of that nature. How much of that is weighed against good moral character? It's got to be very, very tough for everyone involved.
And knowing how to prompt it is like this, what I'm hearing. For example, you can say, write this paper for me, but write it in a way where it doesn't look like artificial intelligence wrote
Yep.
it.
Yep.
And the program will do that for you. It's
Yep.
very hard to determine whether papers are written by the computer system or by the student or the author, him or herself. So there's one other part of technology I want to talk about, Duncan. That's something called the Internet of Things. I know a little something about this because the state of Indiana Internet of Things headquarters is located in Fishers, Indiana, where I live. We have a mayor who's very tech savvy, wants to be on the cutting edge of technology. So he lobbied to get this Internet of Things lab located in Fishers, and it's been here ever since. But Internet of Things is where you kind of attach two things, internet connectivity. And it's been very useful in industry. Uh, Commercially, it's been a huge success, and people have been using it for a very long time there. But the question is, what about regular consumers? There were all kinds of forecasts that Internet of Things would change the way we live in our homes. That we're going to have smart light bulbs. We're going to have ecosystems with Google Home, Alexa, and Apple Home Kit. The problem is, there have been several problems. Number one, all those programs I talked about, they don't talk to each other. So
That
you
sounds
can,
like something of our old employers. Have
oh yeah,
14
our old
systems that none of
employers
them talk to each other.
famous for having systems that cannot are not compatible. But here's what was promised. I mean, this the promise of IoT when it started. Is like, hey, you can have a program where your refrigerator can order food for you. They know when you're running out of milk, for example. It orders it for you and has it sent to you. I mean, that sort of thing. It would do the maintenance and all that kind of thing for you. Well, here's the problem. That hasn't worked very well because you have to buy hardware, you have to have subscriptions. People don't
Right.
pay for that stuff. And I think that the biggest setback for uh, Internet of Things are data breaches because a lot of the Internet of Things programs are like cameras, microphones, sensors. First of all, there's a lot of expense, and yet different programs don't that made by different people don't talk to each other. But what about if you don't want your camera involved in a data breach or the microphone in your home? So I think that there are people who, number one thing, it's an overblown promise, and secondly, this fear of a data breach is a real one.
Yeah, that's in this day and age, that's one of the biggest things that everyone does worry about, making sure that the data that they have is secure, whether it's individual or company or organization. And then, if this does get out, how do you fix it? So, yeah, it is huge. And when you have that much stuff, and, Kim and I have tried to make our home fairly smart. Sometimes it's not as smart as it should be. You know, talking to our, telling somebody our thing to turn on the lights or something of that nature. Um, it's just not as smart. And that's another thing that they have is planned obsolescence, because the systems that we have now are a couple of years old and are not as quick to do things or answer things, or I can't help you with that. Like turn on or off a light. I can't help you with that, or I don't understand. Well, if you get the newer version, that'll, you'll be able to do better with that. Okay, great. Yeah. Why is this planned obsolescence? So there's a lot of different facets of this.
And just to close it out, here's some areas where consumers have liked Internet of Things. The smart speakers, Alexa, Google Nest, and HomePod, those are popular, even though people are worried about breaches. The home security systems, and Ring is the big one, but there are others, Nest cameras, smart locks, other companies doing that. The smart thermostats, where you can control your thermostat with your phone if you want to if you're away from your home during the winter and you come back and you can lower the temperature while you're gone and start to raise it before you get home. And the Apple Watch, the Fitbit, those kind of things, they have been popular, but they're the exceptions, not the rule. So Internet of Things has not been what has been promised for consumers. I just thought, I was thinking about this the other day, what a big thing Internet of Things was for consumers. And I went back and looked at it and thought, well, didn't quite work the way everybody thought. Time's about up, Duncan. Anything you want to say?
Yeah. We've got some neighbors who are, great folks. We, enjoy taking them, if we make a certain dinner, we let them know ahead of time. So, they're up in their years. And so we can make a little bit extra and, that sort of thing. The husband is, had a turn for worse for health and is not probably going to be around long. And this is somebody I enjoy, very straight-laced man, things of that nature. Loved yanking his chain. His wife enjoyed me yanking his chain, and he truly enjoyed it. He loved the back and forth that we would give. And, so you see those types of relationships you have with people. If you have them, make sure to maintain those. Make sure to talk to them, because folks are not going to be around forever. And so, these are people that you'll miss when they're gone. So just make sure to keep connected with the folks that you care about, especially if they're getting on in their years, because you never know when your next conversation with them could be the last.
Well, I've lost a couple of good friends in the last year, so I certainly do sympathize with that. And yeah, you have to value those friendships and nurture them for as long as you can. So, Duncan, thank you very much. If all goes well, we'll be back next week with another edition of Lannan and Giles Unscripted. We have one ask for you as the audience. Like and subscribe to this podcast. We appreciate it. Duncan and Larry will be back soon with another episode. In the meantime, this is Unscripted.